Hi, Premier Moe. Pleasure to welcome you back to the program. Thank you so much for making the time.
Thank you, Vashti.
I wanted to start off and ask you about your meeting with the other premiers and the Prime Minister following his meeting in the Oval Office with U.S. President Donald Trump. Following that meeting, are you more or less optimistic than a week ago about Trump's trade war with Canada?
I would say optimistic, and I always have been optimistic that we would find a path in the trade that happens across North America, across the 49th parallel between Canada and U.S. is important for both countries, and I view it as one of the strongest trading relationships in the world. And so I've always been optimistic we'd find a way, despite where the conversation's been. But I'd say I'm even more optimistic given the Oval Office meeting that happened the other day.
What is in your view, what should be the ultimate objective of Canada if we are to embark on, I'm not sure whether to call them more formal conversations with our American counterparts or negotiations? Like, what's the end goal in your view for this country?
Well, I think the end goal is to build off the strength of the USMCA agreement. And I heard the president, talk about that being a solid foundation of an agreement to build off of, and to include even more items in that agreement. And those trade agreements, they morph and change over time as products change, and they are worthy to be reviewed every 5 or 7 years or whatever that might be. And so, for me, success would be to find our way into that review sooner rather than later, and to expand and build on the very foundation of USMCA, which I think is a solid agreement, and I'm hopeful that the president has come to that realization as well.
You're right to point out that he did make a few comments in that meeting where he seemed to say, broadly he supports the USMCA, but his actions over the past few months have very specifically contravened the conditions that it sets out. Can you trust the Americans on a new USMCA? Like, is there a point in renegotiating an agreement that he could just contravene at any moment, as he has over the last few months?
Yeah, there's no doubt that there's changes in the relationship given what's happened the last number of months, and that's a fair question. Can you trust the Americans to live up to a USMCA agreement? And I think we as Canadians have to at least try, and we have to work within the relationship that we have. They are our largest and most significant trading partner, have been for decades, and likely will continue to be into the foreseeable future. And so we need to be at that table, and Prime Minister Carney, post-election, certainly is. The relationship seems to be far stronger with the new Prime Minister than it was with the previous Prime Minister, and so I very much am optimistic as I look ahead to building on the foundation that we have in the USMCA agreement today, expanding it, and finding a way back to free and fair trade with our largest trading partner, the United States, as well as Mexico.
So you think Mexico should be part of trilateral discussions? Because lots of the conversation, or at least the rhetoric over the past little while, has been about a bilateral negotiation. Should it be trilateral in your view?
In my view, yes, and it has been, and the USMCA is trilateral, and not only from Saskatchewan's perspective do we do significant trade in the U.S., but increasing and fairly significant trade with Mexico as well, and I think there's opportunities to do more. And when we talk about energy dominance, it needs to be from a North American perspective. Food security, manufacturing security, that all really does have to be viewed from a North American perspective. And so, yeah, we'd be in favor of a trilateral deal, although Mexico is a smaller trading partner for Saskatchewan than the U.S., obviously. I think there's still an important and increasing opportunities for us in Saskatchewan, at least there, and likely Canada.
Is it your view that the federal government is aligned with your government on that they also want it to be trilateral?
Yeah, I'd said this on our call, and I'll say it publicly. The provinces very much are there to educate and advocate with all of the folks around the president. It's their national government, our prime minister, that will really set the parameters as to what are the priorities for a trade agreement from Canada's perspective. And our hope is always that they do that in consultation with industry and provinces and such. And I feel that starting to happen. And I won't say that it always has in the years gone by. And so, we're pretty satisfied with, where we are today relative to where we were maybe 2 weeks or 2 months ago with our relationship with the U.S. The whole, very foundation of where the USMCA agreement is today, where we see it going over the course of the next number of months and years. And so I think there is a lot of alignment between Saskatchewan and Prime Minister Carney's position. And we're thankful that relationship seems to be improving rather than where it has been, not too long ago.
I want to pick up more specifically on the relationship between your province and the federal government. The leader of the NDP in your province has introduced legislation this week to essentially increase the threshold for a referendum. She says, her name is Carla Beck, that that's against the background of increased talk around separation. Doesn't she have a point that perhaps that threshold should be higher if that specter of separation is being bandied about more easily?
It's already extremely high, and actually has been identified by the elections officer in Saskatchewan in a review he did a few years ago as likely never being met at the current level. And what she's proposing is to double it. And listen, every 4 years, Canadians have an opportunity to make a choice on who is going to govern them. And in between those 4 years, there are opportunities for referendums and various pieces of referendum legislation across Canada. Saskatchewan's metric on a citizen petition to have a referendum is extremely high. It's 15% of the entire electorate, and the election officer said that likely is not going to be met, or not going to be met easily. And so what the NDP is introducing in Saskatchewan is really an effort on their part to silence the voters' voices in the province. We don't agree with that. Voters do have an opportunity to have their voice heard through meeting the extremely high criteria that we currently have here. But in saying that, there's also this straw man argument that the NDP in Saskatchewan are putting out that it's either separation or it's the status quo. And we actually believe there's an opportunity to work with the new Prime Minister on everybody giving a little bit and finding a path forward that works for Saskatchewan to grow and prosper within a strong united nation of Canada. And that is the path that we are charting and are attempting and making every effort to chart with the new Prime Minister Carney.
And I certainly take that point, but I'm not sure that the opposition there is arguing for the status quo. I remember doing interviews with you, for example, on your opposition to the carbon tax, and they shared with you an opposition to the imposition of that backstop from the federal government. On this point, on the issue of separation, for example, I listened to a scrum with you from about a week ago in which you were asked on multiple instances if you would, specifically outright say it's never going to happen, you're not in favor, you wouldn't vote that way, and you weren't clear in that instance. Your answer has since evolved, but if you were in the opposition and you heard that kind of lack of specificity initially, wouldn't you also be worried about the uncertainty, for example, that the specter of separation could impart on Saskatchewan's economy?
Listen, there is some frustration in this province, and I can't implore on just how serious some of that frustration is. And that frustration is present in Saskatchewan due to, policy decisions that have been made by the previous Prime Minister and his government for close to a decade now. And policy decisions that have had a very significant impact on the way that Saskatchewan people and families create the wealth, not only in their family, but in their communities. And so the frustration that you are hearing about in Saskatchewan communities is very, very real. That's not in any way saying that this is a government that supports what would be the nuclear option, which is to start to advocate to secede from Canada. We very much believe that there is a path forward with this new Prime Minister and whoever is in his cabinet for him, and his government to change course from a policy perspective. Yes, we would have some opportunities to give in certain areas as well, to find some common ground, and to ensure that those frustrations maybe can be satisfied to some degree, and Saskatchewan can get back to doing what we do, which is providing food, fuel, and fertilizer for the world and attracting investment from all around the world. So we very much don't accept the premise that there's only those two options, a status quo, of which the NDP has supported every step of the way for the last 4 years in those federal policies that have caused that frustration, or separation, which is what here in Saskatchewan the NDP can't seem to stop talking about now.
With all due respect, and I certainly agree with your point that the sentiment of being overlooked in Saskatchewan and in Alberta should not be dismissed in any way. And in fact, I've taken that to many federal ministers on many instances to push back against their own framing. But when you talk about the frustrations of the policies of the last decade, for example, informing that kind of the specter of, separation, I looked at your province's website to find out about how the economy was doing. Capital investment year over year up 10.8%. GDP growth up 2.3% year over year. What is the evidence that the policies that you have pinned the blame on have led to the destruction of Saskatchewan's economy? In fact, the statistics show something very different, which could lead Canadians to believe that you are instead fanning the flames of those frustrations for your own political utility.
We can even do better. And we can attract more investment and create more opportunity. We're a very growth-focused government at the provincial level. And the investments that we're seeing happen, new potash mines and such, are very much been in spite of federal policy that has been changed over the course of the last decade. Bill C-69, for example, some of the egress opportunities that we have been limited. And we can go on with respect to the competitiveness of the industries that are operating here and the opportunities that they have. We think it can be even greater going forward. We think most certainly that environment, that improving that investment environment, most certainly is in the best interest of all Saskatchewan residents and Canada for us to be a strong, growing, vibrant province within the nation of Canada. And that's the conversation that I have opened up, and I think publicly, and also in our early conversations with Prime Minister Carney, is let's reset this relationship that we have between Saskatchewan and the federal government, and let's see if we can't chart a path forward that is good for the residents of Saskatchewan, but is also good for the province of Saskatchewan being an even more significant part economically, as well as contributing to a strong united nation of Canada. That's our goal, that's our focus, and that's the conversation that we are embarking on with recently elected Prime Minister Carney.
I'll leave it on that note. I appreciate your time as always, Premier Moe. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vashi.